Welcome back to Sylvester's Customs. Today we are showing you how to properly apply polyester primer to a car that has already had body filler and sanding. If this is your first restoration, this step is critical for blocking out imperfections and setting you up for a smooth top coat. We're going to be going over this car with Javi. Javi's been with us now a few years, and although he has been doing a lot of the priming and painting, we are going to be using a new product today, which is Evercoat's Slick Sand Optics. Some of the tools that you're going to be needing in this is a high build surfacer spray gun for polyester. The gun that I particularly like is the SATA 2.5, I believe it is the BP, it is the Jet 100 BP. That particular gun is designed strictly for a high build surfacer. You are going to be needing a compressor. I like a compressor with at least 60 gallons and between 10 and 14 CFM. Other things that you're going to be needing is you're going to be needing strainers, so that way you can strain the product before you go to put it into the cup and mix it. You're going to need stir sticks, mixing cups. I highly recommend wearing a paint suit, nitrile gloves, and also having a paint mask. The paint mask, definitely don't be using a dust cartridge. You want to be using a charcoal cartridge to eliminate any of the fumes that you're going to be inhaling, as well as a well-ventilated area. You could be doing this in your garage. Just make sure that you have something that is extracting the fumes from your area and or a paint booth like we have here. As you go over and prepare the car to be sprayed, I highly recommend that you do not use like a wax and grease remover or a solvent. We do not want to trap anything into the surface of the vehicle, and so in doing so, we will always use a brand new microfiber towel with compressed air. What that's going to do by wiping it over is it's going to be getting rid of any dust that's down in any crevices. But the reason that we do not want to be using an aerosol of any kind is because those solvents are going to soak up into the polyester body filler, which is porous. The porosity in body filler, whether it is spreadable or sprayable, we do not want to contaminate. We also do not want to be using old rags that we do not know where they have been. So that's why I recommend cleanliness is godliness in this case. Keep everything new, clean, don't be dropping it on the ground, and just use compressed air. We want to make sure that the compressed air that we are using is filtered, free of any oils or contaminants, and that we have a sufficient amount of air supply, so that way the gun is not having drops in pressure and you're always struggling having a good flowing finish. Javi is going to be demonstrating spraying this polyester primer over a 67 Nova. The sandpaper that we have been using to prep that body filler, we ended at 150 grit. Now, per the TDS sheet, the technical data sheet for this product, you can spray polyester over anything from 80 grit to 180 grit and even 220. Some of the caveats there in different grits is strictly based off of how much the product is going to shrink and soak up. Now, although polyester has a very little bit that it's going to shrink, what are the specifics that we are looking for in that shrink? We want something that shrinks fast, and we want something that doesn't have an excessive amount of shrink. I think as a whole, we always try to think, well, how much is it going to shrink over the whole car? When you are priming over a surface that is a surfacer, a high build surfacer like this polyester, we want to shoot the entire car because we don't want to have certain areas that has more porosity versus others. What you'll notice in this particular vehicle is that we have already done one round of super build polyester primer. When we did that, that refined our surface. If you think about when you're putting the body filler on the vehicle, you may have, let's use a general rule of 10 spreads for maybe a door panel as an example. You are connecting all of those spreads with this polyester primer. What that is doing is it's connecting all 10. That way you have one even surface that you can then block down and refine. Because there is a lot of details and body lines on this particular vehicle, we have basically got it to about the 85 percentile mark where we feel really good about it. But why would we pivot to a polyester like Slick Sand versus maybe a super build. Super build gives you, it is exactly what it says in the description. It is a high build. It is super thick. We're talking between 6 and 8 mils thick versus slick sand, which is going to be more like 4 to 6 mils per coat. So when you're just trying to dial in the last little bit, that is also where it is nice to use something like slick sand, that we don't have all of those mils that we have to block back down. We want to control how much our mill thickness is, and we don't want to make this project extremely thick and brittle. We've paid attention to make sure that we have minimal breakthroughs here and there so we can monitor how much of those mils we have left on the vehicle. That is why we are choosing slick sand in this particular application, is to make sure that we don't have anything built out excessive and we just are taking little tiny tweaks in what is left with imperfections and just refining it that much more. If you are new to this and you are having trouble deciphering which primer you should use, what is the difference between epoxy and polyester and etch and all these different kinds, check the link in the description. We have a video that has already nailed down what are the 4 main heavy hitter primers that is specific for what substrate, what project, and what is your goal to not have any confusion as to what to pick. When you are starting to mix the product, because it is a polyester, it is extremely thick. Make sure that you take the time to blow off the top of the lid so you don't have any dust or contaminants falling in while you're stirring. Stir it thoroughly so you do not have any excessive buildup at the bottom of the stick. And at that point, you are going to be pouring it into your mixing cup using strainers just in case there's any old lumpy areas of the polyester. And then you are going to be mixing in the catalyst. The catalyst is the MEKP in a tube form. What you are going to be mixing is 1 tube for every quart of sprayable polyester that you are going to be mixing up. If you are finding yourself confused as to how much of this product to add into the slick sand, I don't want you guys to get mixed up because there are different catalysts for different products. You need to make sure that you are reading the TDS sheet to make sure that you are using the correct catalyst. For example, Evercoat has finish sand or super build. Those are a 4-to-1 polyester. In doing those products, there is a slight bit of epoxy that is in the catalyst itself that allows that product to be a DTM, a direct to metal. In slick sand's case, slick sand is not a DTM. You will need to put a slight bit of epoxy down if you have any bare metal areas showing. And then when you mix this product, you are doing 1 tube for every quart. The other thing you should know with polyester is I always mix only what I am able to spray in the cup that I'm going to do at that moment, because your ambient temperature is going to be a direct correlation as to how much your pot life, meaning how long that primer in the cup is going to stay a liquid before it solidifies. If you are doing this outside or it's a hot day in the middle of summer, you're going to find that as it dries and cures, the liner of your cup and or the orifices as it becomes sprayable will then slowly start to close up and things may not spray as nice. How you will get around that on a hot day is to constantly clean the gun and or discard the liner. Like in this case, we're using a PPS cup. You may want to use more liners than just one. I have found that in a shop circumstance like we have here, where we have controlled environment with air conditioning and or heat, we want to be shooting for 70 degrees, which is typically what most paint products are being tested at. That way we know it is an accurate amount of time based off of what the technical data sheet tells us we have. There are 2 critical factors making sure that you do not miss this step. Mix it thoroughly and make sure that you are mixing it to the correct ratio so you don't have issues of it under catalyzing or over catalyzing in your gun, causing sprayable issues. Never eyeball it, always measure your exact ratios. As you mix this up in the cup and you're about to put your gun and or PPS cups together, one of the factors that I've found that becomes an issue is that the PPS cups already come with a strainer or screen in them. Because polyester is so thick, I recommend straining it before you put it in the cup and removing the actual screen. These screens are more designed for your sealers, your base coats, and clear. But when you're shooting something with this thick of a viscosity, you don't want to have that hinder the flow that's getting to your gun. Just remove it, put it back in, and continue on. Hold my beer, here we go. Hair's on, yep. All right, so we're just gonna show you guys here what we have. This is the 67 Nova with body work already done. We have super build that's already been block sanded out. And anywhere you see the black spots, that is just a very thin epoxy primer to give us adhesion to bare metal. It's just one little light coat. You also do not want to be doing this the same day, so to speak. I would say that read your technical data sheet for whatever epoxy you are using, because what happens is this has a solvent in it, and if it is still too wet and cannot be top coated in the timeline that you need, you're going to have a delamination issue with the polyester over it. So in this case, we shot these spots yesterday, and that allowed it to dry enough that we could come in with 220 grit and do a quick light scuff over those spots, and now we don't have to worry about anything gassing off or solvent trying to exit the building. So let's talk about this gun here. We have the SATA BP, what is it? The 100 BP, isn't it?
Jet.
It's the Jet 100 BP. This particular polygun is a 2.5 tip. What settings are you going to have on your gun right now? Like when you pull the trigger on that gun, what PSI do you have?
Have it at like 35, 40.
That's fine. 35?
I start at 40.
40? Go back down to like 35. Let's just play with it, yeah. Also, another thing that we have here is we have a diaphragm regulator. The diaphragm regulators, you're not going to see a difference where you're going to get pressure drops while you're spraying, where it's constantly up and down and having different issues. When it comes to the fan, we want to have it wide open. That way you get a nice wide pattern on the car. And then also we're going to have the fluid needle open all the way, so that way this trigger can get full coverage. We want that full 4 to 6 mils build on the car, and we want to apply this evenly. So a lot of guys will want to just shoot and be lazy, and they will stay with the car and they will just shoot here and then overlap. But the problem is that if you do that, you end up with areas that become thicker and thinner, and it is no different than doing this with spreadable body filler. We want to treat polyester primer kind of like a candy coat, where we walk the whole length of the car and try to make everything as uniform as possible, knowing that we're still going to be blocking it anyway. But so go ahead and just do a little spray out on the plastic of the car, and let's see how it looks with wide open. I'm gonna go upstream of you, that way I'm not breathing anything. So just anywhere on the plastic there, just give me like one quick little pass so we can see what we have. Okay, so you can see it's extremely wet. We don't have it where it's, you know, flowing like a waterfall off, but what you're really looking for is to make sure that the gun is not sputtering and that you're getting a nice uniform coverage. If this looked dry, then you wouldn't be getting enough of a nice fluid flow. That's why it's critical with a thick polyester that you have that needle open all the way. That way, that's what you get. I would say between 6 to 10 inches away. If you get so far out that things start looking dry, then you need to close up your distance. But overall, that pattern looks really good. We can adjust as we go. So let's start with all of the hard to get areas. which for me are always down low, and or you can start on the roof, because the other factor there is that if you did everything on the sides, then you've got to lean over and you risk bumping the car when it's wet. So for me, I can either start on the roof or on the side. I guess at some point you're going to be leaning over a wet car regardless. So in that case, let's start with all the bottom edges, and from there we can then work evenly, ironing it out all the way from one end to the other. Any questions on that? Ask as you go. Also, when you're spraying stuff like this, you'll notice how to get under that very bottom lip, maybe it makes sense that you jack the car up in the air so you can get those bottom lip areas, or it might make sense to actually only use your index finger to tilt the gun all the way up under like he's doing, so that way he's getting a full coat. Also, be looking at your edge and make sure that you have good coverage. Make sure that it's nice and wet all the way under the edge. That way you don't have areas that are drier than others. Okay. So like in this, go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Another factor in what he's doing right now is that he's actually moving down the panel, and you can see how he's having an issue with the gun sputtering. That's because the gun is tilted to the side, and you kind of have to find like a 30 to 45 degree angle. That way the gun is not sputtering, because as soon as you go full lateral, you only have the little bit of primer that's in the gun, and we want to make sure that we have enough coverage in primer to have the rocker covered. Once the very bottom lip is done, the rest of it's a lot easier to just run through front to back. Yep. You definitely want to slow down your travel speed as you go. That way you're getting enough of a mill build. You don't want it to look dry, and you can get in closer if you would like to go faster. But let's take a look and see if we have enough good wet coat. And it does look pretty good. Anytime you have a curvature that you need to go around, like you can see this here body lip, sometimes it makes sense that you can actually twist these horns. And the way to think about these horns is if you have them side to side, this is a paintbrush. So the paintbrush is sticking off of here, and if you flip the horns, the paintbrush is then the other direction. So if you need to get the side of a wheel lip, take your time and just turn the horns of the gun so you can get a very accurate flow over that surface. Great idea. Also, this is your last glance at spray pattern and how you move around this particular car. So the more that you can be thinking in the terms of, I'm going to be spraying this next. I want you to work through this in the same manner as if this is paint. And what did you like better? Did you like to do the rockers, or did you like to do the roof? You may start with the rockers now, and on the second coat of poly, we could also start on the roof and see what flows better for how you like. But yeah, just focus on trying to think about this as your final coat, because you've already done a majority of the body work. The other thing you can do is, even though it's poly and it's not going to shine for very long, it is giving you a slight glimpse of how good your body work is or isn't. And maybe you prime the whole side and you look down it and say, hey, I missed this spot, or this, I need to spend more time body working these specific areas more than others. Regardless, the guide coat, when we go to block this, is going to show you that, but go ahead and just move right through it. Okay. One thing that's definitely critical about what he's doing here is he is making sure that his foot overlap is going down the side of the car and that the hose is not getting in his way. Sometimes it makes sense to walk over out of the way of the car, get your hose going in where you need it to be, and then take your time. Watch that foot movement as he goes down the car. He's overlapping, he's even, he's staying a distance away from the car that is even. Try to be the robot. That is really key. You can also turn your pressure down. Like, what PSI are you at right now? 35? Try 30, because a lot of factors that people don't think about is how much of the product is being wasted and is on the floor or leaving. If you turn your pressure down to where we can focus the paint to actually be hitting the car, we don't waste as much paint. It's all going on the car. So try 30, and instead, remember, it's like a speed difference that you're going to change. So as you go through, you're not going to be able to go quite as fast. So try to be taking your time and going slower. A lot of people are always nervous to ruin the amount of time they've spent in the bodywork stage. So if you dial in your gun and do what works for you, you can move slower because you're not pumping out as much product as you need for the speed that you're going to be going. So try 30, try different things. In this case, especially with this particular product, find what works, write it down, write down your settings of your guns, what product you use, what was the temperature, what was the humidity, and that way every time you come back to do another car, that is very repeatable. Yep, I would say over here. Yep. Javi, moving forward, just ignore whatever I'm talking about, okay? You're jamming me up. Especially for me being in the booth right now without a mask, turning that pressure down, I noticed a substantial difference, and I'm not seeing all of that overspray flying around your garage. And if you guys are doing this at home, this is just that much more product you're not going to have laying all over your toolbox. Also creating dust in the atmosphere. You can see how much more slow he's working through the panel. Pay attention to watching the actual product flow out. And even in this case, he's making sure he's catching all the edges inside that gas filler. Another point that I'll make is that as you start to see how much or how far you got with one cup, maybe you guys are using a bigger cup, a smaller cup, start making a mental note now for this particular product. One cup will get me one whole side of the car halfway up. That way, as you work around, you're not mixing more product than you actually need and wasting it, because once it's catalyzed, it's done. You can also see how nice and shiny it is when it's still wet, but as it flashes off and gases off, that shine will start to go away. Also, a big factor in this particular product with Slick Sand Optics, the optics sprays pink. Now what that is doing is it is a built-in guide coat. That built-in guide coat, when it dries and cures, and then you sand it, it sands gray. A lot of people want to get online and talk about how maybe they had adhesion problems and the pink came back later and showed up. The issue is that they didn't sand the pink off. The pink is actually a sacrificial coating that will rise to the top of the product as it cures, and it has to be sanded off. It cannot be just scuffed with a Scotch pad and continued to paint over. You want to completely remove everything in pink. Those pink is just helping you make sure that you've covered every area of block sanding. For example, there's a lot of details in areas and body lines. Don't just half sand the car and just think it's okay to move forward. Every square inch of this car needs to be sanded and there be no visible pink showing. If you guys are wanting to dial in some of your techniques on blocking this particular product, please subscribe, like this video. We're going to be doing a series of videos. Check out some of the older videos, learn things from them, try to apply it in a real scenario, and go back to the video, watch it again. There's a lot of packed information that I think you might hear and think that you grasp these things, but it just physically isn't there. It's a muscle memory. It is a practiced art in doing high-level body filler. And if you guys get to a point in your project where you're still struggling and that maybe you're a hands-on type of person, check out sylvesterscustoms.com, where we actually have in-person classes here at the shop, and we dial in everything on your restoration, from planning the build. Maybe you don't know where to start in your restoration, how to prep metal, what are the different ways to strip a car, what are the different products that we use and why, how you do TIG welding, MIG welding, metal finishing, dent repair. We cover all of those things in our actual in-person classes. We constantly update sylvesterscustoms.com for what those dates are. So if you see a date and that doesn't work for you, check back at a later date or become part of our email subscription, where we will then send out notifications for upcoming classes so you guys don't miss out. I believe he's just going to be going up the sail panel, and then from there he's going to get the, actually I think he's going to go right to the top of the quarters and then go up over the hood. Same thing for the trunk, and then continue up the roof. So let's check out the finish here. You don't want to stack dry build. You're used to moving a specific speed. We changed your pressure a little lower. And so when you're actually looking at the panel, where it's going, try to angle the gun more perpendicular to the shape. So here you're good, here you're on the body line. And when you come up, tilt the gun more up so that way you're perpendicular to the panel, and just move a little bit slower. Yeah. As you, just stand right there. You're vlogging. So as you move through this panel, just stay perpendicular to each shape. Move the gun, because especially with polyester, if you have the horns pointed more down, then you have an area that ends up being a thicker build than the other side. So if you're always remembering that paintbrush is only going to be dragging where the paintbrush is touching. That's kind of the rule of thumb. But if you see anything look dry, The reason that you want to really focus on perpendicular to, say, like this curvature, if that gun is not perpendicular to both curvatures, what you get is you get a whole bunch of dry spray that's not really sticking good, and we want to hit this thing nice and wet all the way. So go ahead and carry on. Breathe. Right. Everybody has their muscle memory as they move through a panel. Even if you don't have any experience, it's just what you like, and sometimes you have to force yourself against the grain as to what feels comfortable. I'm trying to focus on looking at the camera as well as, yeah, I know, I hear you. Yep. This kind of comes into a glimpse here. Like you can see right here in the sail panel, there's a slight high right here where there might be a area that we're going to have to massage out. This is kind of where you're just getting that extra glimpse in the sheen of the car and seeing what you like and what you don't like. You gonna hit front? You gonna hit front and back now, or?
Yeah. Is it okay if I go?
Is it okay if I hit the back this way and then meet the two?
Yes. So when we talk about the block, when we talk about how you're gonna spray, and also the detailed blocking that we're gonna be showing in some of the next videos of this, how to block poly, the block has to track a specific way till you see things show up. The gun kind of has to correlate to that. You're spraying this way, but it doesn't make sense to hold the gun and then drop down. So when you block laterally with parallel to body lines, and your gun typically needs to go parallel with that light line as well, or where your reflection is going to be. So in this case, yes, to answer your question, you can totally do this to what is comfortable, that you can go all the way off the panel and then switch around to the backside, and at that point you can connect the two and overlap. Okay. You got it. Also notice how, just keep going. Also notice how when he does it, he's turning the horns of the gun from one direction to another, focusing on that spray pattern. I'm just getting out of the way of the fumes. Hey, yeah. Give me nice coughing in the video, that'll be great. Yep. Also here, he's positioning his body in the center of the back of the car. That way his stroke can reach all the way across the end. He's not creating a high point in the center of the trunk. You're either walking the length of the car or you're walking the distance of the back of the vehicle. Angling the gun to make sure that you hit every angle of that inset for that molding or edge of a panel. And he's maintaining it all the way up and overlapping into the top. And then he's going to drag around and catch. Should be good. Got a nice knot here. Good enough. Step where now? Yeah, it's kind of, this is the worst spot to be right here. And he's out. When we talk about practicing those best practices in priming the vehicle, pretending that you're painting, this right here is one of the biggest factors for a guy painting in his garage or even in a booth. This is just a magnetic mount from Luma. The majority of guys get the dust on the hose. If you were to drop the hose on the ground, you walk back out to then mix or refill the cup, all of that stickiness that you have an overspray from the vehicle to the hose then just stays on that hose. And as soon as you lean over a roof, you just took all that dust and sprinkled it over the top. And then you sit there and ask yourself, well, I went into the area, I grabbed the tack cloth, there should be no dust up there. 99% of your dust that you end up in your car is typically from your clothes or your paint suit or your hose. The hose is a big one. That's pretty good.
So now he's gonna flux to the other side.
Well, he'll have to get the hood, but yeah.
Good. So remember that camera's up there? He's doing the hood like he's doing.
Copy. So we're kind of evaluating what we have for product left because we have 2 gallons for this particular car. What I will say is you're probably a good 8 to 10 inches away. You can utilize your speed and how far you're moving across the panel if you get closer, because now you're putting more of the product into the car, but if you get closer, you have to move faster. So you know right now that's what, 3rd cup? So 2 cups only got you there. We still got roof in this. So I'd like to make 2 full coats on this car. So try to tighten it up space-wise and try to move faster. So just pay attention to your finish. No, I mean space-wise to the car. If you're farther away, you're moving slower. You want to move through the car faster, get closer. You're constantly pivoting for your product, whether that's paint, primer, sealer, whatever. See how much wetter that is? What's that? Oh. See, you're hitting it. I mean, we compare the finish. You're hitting that way heavier just by closing up that gap a couple inches of distance. So that's what we want. You're gonna make way more ground and you're putting more builds on there. More builds, that's the thing. More build. Yep. Looks a lot better, huh? It should be on top of the filing cabinet. There's a little set of keys there. Yeah. What's that? No, he's got the whole other side of the hood still. Also keeping the hose nice and away from the panel, up over his shoulder. That is what you want. That way you're not dropping the hose. He also has his hand holding the back of the hose so it cannot flop. So what I've noticed is you start out close and you have a tendency, that muscle memory where you want to come back up. Try to stare at your product and see how it's laying down and try to be as close as you can and still maintain that. If it's too heavy, you can dial in your needle to have less product flowing and just figure out what works.
I think I'm doing that to compensate for the weight because my shoulder's getting tired, so just...
Yep. Javi's just stating that he feels like he's compensating for the weight of his arm and him getting tired and the fatigue, which really is counterintuitive because if your hand is up, you're holding it higher, and if you just relax your arm down, you can be closer to the panel, adjust your gun settings and your pressure, and figure out what movement that you need speed-wise and how close. But really the biggest factor here is that, in my opinion, that's wasted product in the air that's floating because it's not all going on the panel. You'll hear the term dry spray. Well, dry spray is theoretically when you're too far away from the panel and you have too high of an air pressure, because now that droplet is very tiny and it's itemizing small. By the time that tiny droplet gets to the car, it's already dry, and that is what dry spray is. Versus when you turn the air pressure down, you have a bigger droplet. That bigger droplet is a wetter droplet, and it is not dry spray. All right, go ahead. You can definitely see the difference, and now that he's closer, he can move down the panel a lot faster. It's very hard to fight those things where you have a speed that you like to move. Phil? When we're showing the differences between how much shrinkage that we have and what is actually going to show, sure, the whole product from a whole panel standpoint is going to shrink, but what we're really referring to, hopefully this shows up on camera, there's an area of body filler right here that has been worn through on the polyester, and we can see the difference in the substrate. So body filler itself, see if we can find another area. Here's another area right here. When we're showing the difference between what this primer looks like going over existing polyester versus body filler. Body filler, although they're both polyester, one has more porosity than the other. Just like this slick sand has less porosity than even super build. But what we want is we want one perfect substrate to paint over. If you were to jump to a sealer before having everything one uniform color with no breakthroughs, what you're going to see with that sealer is it is going to wick in more than the area around it. And that shrinkage is what is going to show in the finish of your paint job. That's why this step that we're doing right now with slick sand, in my opinion, is critical, because even if your bodywork is spot on and you don't have any dents or any waves in your vehicle, you will have waves. You may not have it today, you may not have it next month, but I assure you within 6 to 8 months, as products cure, and it's dependent on how fast you went through the project. Technically, the longer that you take to do your project, the better that your finish will actually look overall, because you're giving all of these products time to cure and to shrink. But having it uniform, that is paramount. The next thing that comes into play is that you don't have any breakthroughs. Each primer, whether it's epoxy high build, whether it's polyester urethane, they all have a different amount of shrinkage, and how long does it take for that product to shrink. The reason that we have pivoted from a high build epoxy primer to a polyester is because those things shrink and dry fast. But if you miss the mark and you have areas where you have body filler showing and you have polyester showing, when you go to seal the car, it shrinks more in the areas that have filler or bare metal showing, because it is not the same substrate that you are spraying over. If you have areas after you block this that are broken through, then maybe it makes sense to actually thin your polyester slightly with a little bit of acetone, so that way it's just going to flow out. You can make the covered area and then you can feather it out. The biggest reason that we switched from a high build epoxy, you can still do the same amount of steps, but the biggest one is time. The amount of time that it takes an epoxy in general to cure is far greater than polyester. Most epoxies typically have a 72-hour recoat window versus, I want to say that polyester is like somewhere around 4 hours. It's a big difference. You want it to shrink, cure, and be done and not have breakthroughs. If you have any pinholes, then typically what I like to do is, if maybe you didn't see them when you were prepping the vehicle, go ahead. If you have pinholes, you just need to keep focusing to go over them, so that way the polyester will then flow into those holes and cover, and then you're not going to fight it later. If you guys are painting a car that is low to the ground, you'll also notice that the air hose has a swivel in it, and that allows him to get the gun closer to the ground, so he's not running out of space and hitting an area. That will also be beneficial if you're doing like a roll cage or a tight area where you have constraints. You can get that hose up and out of your way. There'll be a bunch of pink flies floating around. Yep. It goes from close to not close. It's just reminding him, kind of like me talking to the camera elsewhere. That's all. I think a lot of guys in this stage right here where we're gonna go up over the quarter panel struggle because everybody always feels rushed when they're spraying. And when they do that, that's usually when they're gonna lean over and run into the panel, or they're not thinking about their sleeve that's hanging out there. So I like that he leaned over and he checked, is my suit good to reach over to this point, and he get a quick verification before he actually put paint on the vehicle. Yep. Okay. Also, one of the factors in the fact that he's just priming. A lot of guys don't want to do the spraying or the priming part of this because they're nervous of making a defect or ruining the work that they've already done. When in reality, if you are going to slap the panel or bump it, this is the time to do it because you are still going to block this out. You can still spot prime things in and fix them. You don't have to worry as critical about it as you may think. Here's another factor. A lot of guys, for whatever reason, I'm gonna wait till he gets done with this side of the roof. Choking me out. As I was saying while he's mixing primer, a lot of guys, because they're new, they always want to pick single stage. And I think it's because people think that clear coat is very runny and they're going to get a run. But here's actually a factor about paint that I think will put you at ease for doing this yourself for the first time. Picture doing this product, or picture doing single stage paint. Single stage paint is actually got the catalyst in it, and you do have a timeline, and you are always chasing a wet edge. So if you pick single stage, you're actually causing more stress than if you picked a base coat clear coat, because you can see how much time he's taking gathering his thoughts, remixing. He's not worrying about the product being all mixed in one batch. He can mix it as he goes. Well, you can do the same thing with base coat. There's not a time constraint with base coat. It's not catalyzed. Yes, you have the option to have 5% catalyst if you're doing maybe a bumper or something like that. But let's throw that to the side because we're focusing on restoration. And in a restoration application, that single stage, because you're on a time constraint and because you have to maintain wet edge, let's just say there's a fly in here right now. That fly lands in your single stage paint. You have to try to then pick that out, fix the blemish, which you can't do because it's going to stay wet and tacky the whole time until that has fully cured. If you use base coat, you could theoretically just fall right in the paint job and wait for it to dry 10-15 minutes and then wet sand that out and continue the process fixing it. A bug could land in it. You could pick it out. You could wet sand out the blemish. Now you're focusing on making the whole car uniform, not tiger striped, not splotchy. And when that is done, it might take you all day. Then you can clear coat. Well, the other benefit to doing base coat, clear coat is that if you have got all the base done, and let's say you get a run in the clear coat, it's clear. You just sand the run out and polish it. If you get a run in single stage, because it already has the catalyst in it and you now have to wait. If it is a metallic single stage, which I do not recommend, all of the metallics will gather in the run, and if you sand it out and polish it, all the metallics will show that V in the run. So it's a lot more forgiving to use base coat, clear coat. So in this case, the only factor that I have had in my experience is, like, I'll get this ladder as close as I possibly can that it's not going to shift or move, with the exception of the tips of my toes, because I have painted a car, and when I got done, I did not realize that the tip of my boot just touched the side of the car, and that got cleared in. Yeah, no. See that ladder move? Oh, it's making my back hurt. I just threw it out, so this is much more comfortable being over here. Obviously here, with this having an area where he can't reach, this where he comes back and then overlaps, this is going to be thicker than the remainder of the car. But does it really matter? In this scenario, no, because we're going to reblock this whole car. It's just things to be thinking about as to how you're going to plan your spray. That way you don't have those areas where you have a whole bunch of start and stops down the car. I'd rather deal with one or two than all down the car everywhere. That's going to be way more labor, way more blocking on your end. Good? So, overall, how did you like going from bottom to top?
I like it better because it gets you used to having the entire car wet. So therefore you're leaning over, you're being more careful as you go. That's why I like it better.
Okay.
It preps me for it to be
Painted.
already.
And there's also different scenarios, even for you guys that are trying to plan out how you want to start. Maybe it matters in the conditions that you have. Like Javi stated, if you guys can't hear, he stated that he likes to work from the harder areas down low, up over the top, and because the sides are then wet, he's practicing that whole being careful as he works through the project. Really, it boils down to just taking your time, not rushing it. Don't feel anxious. Just take a breath, maybe you take a drink, and just really don't rush. But it's looking really good. And by all means, if you guys have comments of things you want to add, put them in the comments section below. This is gonna be the first coat complete. How much product have we used so far?
A gallon and like.
So 5 quarts just for one coat. Now that we have one nice uniform coat through, we have a flash time on this product between 10-15 minutes. As you guys can see, it takes some time to get all the way through this car. He's going to be planning the second coat. So pretty much as soon as you finish one coat, you can go right back to the bench and continue mixing, continue spraying. If you're doing smaller panels and you get through them in just a couple minutes, then you need to allow the 10 to 15 minute flash time to let it gas off so you can reapply the second, third, however many coats you guys want to do. This mill build right now, we have 4 to 6 mills per coat. Depending on where your body work is and what product you are shooting, pay attention to how much you want to put on there to then work out maybe your blemishes. In this case, right now, as I look over the whole car, we have a couple little pinholes just here and there that got missed. So he is going to go ahead and spot in and get that polyester to flow into those pinholes. To do that, he's gonna get a lot closer and force that into those holes so we don't have a void in there of an air pocket. As a recap, as he's gone through this first coat, some of the common problems that you guys will have in your first time is having dry spray. Just to reiterate, dry spray is where you're too far away from the panel and you have too much air pressure. You need to dial in your coats to see a nice, even, wet coat. If you have too much orange peel is typically too much air pressure. You can play with your air pressure and distance to get a better finish. And really, in polyester, we don't really care so much about orange peel. We actually want a good orange peel for mill build. If you get a run anywhere in the vehicle, just let it dry and you're going to block sand it out. It is not the end of the world. The last thing that I would say is probably the most problematic is when you start spraying, it may look great. And as you get through the car, the finish starts looking worse and worse. And it's because the paint is catalyzing just like spreadable body filler would be. And what it's doing is it's closing all of the orifices in the gun. So it is a very good rule of thumb. It is dependent upon your temperature that you are spraying in. If it is a higher temperature day and the gun is starting to not spray as nice, take the time when you go to remix another quart into your gun, spray the gun out with maybe some brake cleaner or paint gun cleaner, and make sure you open up all of the orifices and little air holes. If you're using maybe a siphon feed, a lot of times it's trying to suck the product out of the gun or out of the cup, and those orifices are plugged. And or the horns for where it disperses the paint and itemizes it, those holes start to build up and plug. Take the time, figure out what works for you and your conditions. If it means every 2 quarts that you spray, you clean the gun and come back. Don't just keep trying to pivot with how the gun is spraying. Fix the gun, get a nice, good, nice uniform wet coat all the way through, and don't have dry spray. Keep an eye on the channel. We're gonna be putting out a video on the details about how we block this vehicle. You guys won't wanna miss it. How was that? I don't know why. It's the simple ones I can't get. So we're done in here, yeah? Oh, okay.